Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has vowed to, quote, correct a historic mistake, one that left the country landlocked after Eritrea's independence. His bold remarks have sent shockwaves throughout the Horn of Africa. Could East Africa be heading toward a new confrontation over the Red Sea? Or is this hardline political posturing? Welcome to the Africa Briefing Room, where Africa's headlines meet hard analysis. Back in July, we covered how Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki issued a stark public warning to Ethiopia, warning it against any reckless moves that could destabilize the region. If you missed that report, it's linked in the description, where we explored the roots of this tension. Today, we shift our focus to Addis Ababa again, where recent rhetoric from the Ethiopian government is raising new alarms. The pivot, Ethiopia's rising ambitions in the Horn of Africa, are once again making global headlines. In early September 2025, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed delivered his sharpest remarks yet on Ethiopia's landlocked status, calling it a, quote, historic mistake that he vowed to correct. His remarks were delivered during a nationally televised interview, and they marked a clear break from his earlier diplomatic tone months ago. This wasn't the language of diplomacy anymore. It was the language of a leader drawing a line in the sand. The Prime Minister framed access to the Red Sea as an issue of national survival. He said, quote, the mistake made 30 years ago will be corrected tomorrow. The Red Sea was in our hands. That was yesterday's mistake. Tomorrow, it will be corrected. This wasn't just a bold statement for television. It reflected Ethiopia's growing frustration with the reality that shaped its economy for decades. Total dependence on Djibouti's ports since Eritrea gained independence in 1993. Ethiopia's strategic dilemma. Ethiopia is now Africa's second most populous country. But despite its size and rising influence, nearly 95% of its imports still flow through Djibouti, costing the country roughly around $1.5 billion a year in port and logistics fees. These growing costs, financial and political, are fueling the urgency behind the Prime Minister's remarks. Ethiopia is feeling the weight of economic dependency. And with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam now complete, there is growing public pressure for tangible results, not just political rhetoric. It's important to understand, Ethiopia isn't just looking for cheaper transit or lower port fees. In Prime Minister Ahmed's own words, what Addis Ababa wants is something far bigger: direct and preferably sovereign access to the Red Sea. But that demand touches the deepest nerves of the region, questions of territory, independence, and national identity. And it's exactly what makes compromise profoundly challenging. Despite not having a coastline since 1993, Ethiopia has recently taken bold steps to rebuild its navy, part of a broader effort to project power in the Red Sea region. On September 6, 2025, the Ethiopian military inaugurated a navy headquarters in Addis Ababa, along with a naval training center in Bishoftu. Addis Ababa also signed a naval cooperation agreement with Russia this year, focused on training and doctrine. Ethiopian leaders framed the navy not just as a symbol, but as a strategic move, preparing the country for eventual port access, or at minimum strengthening Addis Ababa's negotiating position for any future maritime negotiations. Officials argue that maritime capabilities are essential for national security, trade protection, and regional influence, even as critics question the logic of building a navy without a coastline. For Addis Ababa, the answer is clear: readiness and leverage, especially as the Red Sea's strategic importance continues to grow. The regional impact of Prime Minister Ahmed's Red Sea Gambit is unfolding. In Somalia, tensions remain high, following Ethiopia's controversial Memorandum of Understanding with Somaliland, signed in January 2024. The MOU proposed granting Ethiopia access to Somaliland's coast, in exchange for possible diplomatic recognition and investment. The agreement sparked outrage in Mogadishu and fueled wider regional anxieties. Eritrea, on the other hand, which fought a bloody border war with Ethiopia 2 decades ago, has not issued a formal response. However, Eritrean state media and senior officials have reacted sharply, escalating anti-Ethiopian messaging and warning that any move by Addis Ababa to reclaim Red Sea access would threaten Eritrean sovereignty. For officials in Asmara, Prime Minister Ahmed's vow to correct a mistake is widely interpreted as both a strategic threat and, potentially, a declaration of war. Egypt, meanwhile, has deepened its own involvement. In September, Cairo deployed roughly 1,000 troops to Somalia under the AU's new African Union Somalia Support Mission mandate, which replaced the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia. Officially, the troop deployment is part of a stabilization mission against al-Shabaab, but many view the move as aimed squarely at countering Ethiopia's growing ambition, both on the Red Sea and in the ongoing Nile River dispute. Tensions over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam continue to strain relations between Cairo and Addis Ababa, a conflict we'll explore in a separate video. Still, it's important to note that Somalia's government formally requested Egypt's support. On August 14, 2024, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi signed a bilateral defense pact in Cairo, adding a new layer to an already complex regional chessboard. Ethiopia reacted to the agreement, viewing it as a significant shift in regional dynamics. Ethiopian officials warned that increased military cooperation between Somalia and Egypt would escalate regional tensions and put additional pressure on Ethiopia's own security and interests. Why it matters? This is no longer just about economics or trade routes. By invoking the language of existential necessity, speaking not just of national pride, but of national survival, Prime Minister Ahmed has cast Ethiopia's demand for direct Red Sea access as a long-term goal worth almost any cost. That kind of language lays the groundwork for escalation, whether through political pressure, regional realignment, or in the worst-case scenario, open confrontation. The region's history still casts a shadow: wars between Ethiopia and Eritrea, clashes with Somalia, and bitter disputes with Egypt over the Nile. Together, they leave the Horn of Africa dangerously combustible. Egypt's recent deployment of troops in Somalia, officially framed as counter-terrorism and peacekeeping, is viewed with deep suspicion in Addis Ababa. Ethiopian forces have also operated in Somalia, both under African Union mandates and bilateral agreements. And with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam tensions simmering to the north, the region's security puzzle grows more complex with every passing month. At the same time, Sudan is mired in conflict, Djibouti is maneuvering between neighbors, and Gulf states, each with their own Red Sea stakes, are watching these developments very closely. If the current crisis continues to escalate, the involvement of outside actors, from the African Union to the Arab League, is likely inevitable. This was apparent when multilateral pressure stalled Ethiopia's efforts to implement the January 2024 Somaliland Access Agreement. Maritime bravery, external influence, and the risk of escalation. The Red Sea is not just a regional issue. As one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, it carries enormous strategic and economic weight. Gulf states, particularly the UAE and Saudi Arabia, have deep interests in its ports, trade routes, and political stability. Eritrea, which shares coastline along the Red Sea, has long-standing ties with Gulf states. The UAE closed its military base in Eritrea's Assab port in 2021, but Eritrea remains a founding member of the Red Sea Council and maintains ties with both Riyadh and Abu Dhabi on Red Sea affairs. For those unfamiliar, the Red Sea Council, formerly known as the Council of Arab and African States bordering the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, is an intergovernmental forum that brings together the main coastal countries of this key waterway: Djibouti, Egypt, Eritrea, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Its main purpose is to promote security and cooperation among member states facing common challenges in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. For Asmara, the prospect of Ethiopia regaining direct access to a Red Sea port represents both a strategic threat and a symbolic loss, one that challenges its hard-won independence. And as Ethiopia's rhetoric continues to intensify, fears are growing that this dispute could become weaponized, with trade routes, regional stability, and even armed conflict. It's also worth noting that, while Ethiopian rhetoric has become more assertive, officials maintain that Addis Ababa's preference is for a negotiated, peaceful solution to the Red Sea access dilemma, even as frustration over the lack of progress grows. In closing, Prime Minister Ahmed vowed to, quote, correct a mistake is reshaping the political landscape. The Horn of Africa is already on edge, with conflict in Sudan, instability in Somalia, and unresolved tensions over the Nile, adding Ethiopia's Red Sea ambitions, and the region may be entering its most volatile chapter in decades.